When it comes to choosing books for newborns, babies, and toddlers, there's a few things you'll want to avoid. In this video, I'll share the 3 things that I personally look out for or rewrite when reading books to my daughter, plus real-life examples of Montessori-aligned books that look good at a glance, but I personally think miss the mark developmentally, and I'll explain why in this video. If you're new here, my name is Rachel from the Confused Millennial. Welcome to my channel. I worked for years as a research assistant with children in the field of psychology. I studied for years in biofeedback lab, and I have my master's in education with a focus in mental health counseling. And this video is part 2 in how to choose books for 0 to 3-year-olds. So definitely make sure to go back, check out that first one where I share more of the positive things to look for. This is more of the what to avoid. And it's part of a larger how we realistically Montessori at home series. Let's get into it, starting with why we need to select books carefully for our preschoolers, toddlers, and babies. Between the ages of 0 and 6-ish years old, babies and kids are primarily in their delta and theta brainwaves. During 0 to 2, the delta brainwaves really dominate our kids' experience. It's where our unconscious mind lies, and really what the brain is doing when it's in these waves is just recording, sorting, and imprinting all of the information around them. I forget the exact statistic, but I think 80% of your brain development is done by the age of 2. Like, this is what that stage is about. It's deeply formative. The next level up, after we move out of delta, we move into theta, which is really dominates our kids between 2 to 6-ish, 7-ish years old. Theta waves are our subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is home to our operating system, if you will. This is where our entire worldview, our view about ourselves, our view about others is all forming and being stored. All of our limiting beliefs are formed during this age, between 2 and 6. If we think about our brain like an operating system in a computer, it just pulls those files from the subconscious mind, and that is how we're choosing to respond and react to the world, is from this area of our brain. So to really drive this point home, between 0 and 7 years old, kids are essentially just on record. They are taking in everything that they're seeing, hearing, reading, energy frequencies that they're feeling. It is one of the most powerful and transformative periods that any of us will ever go through. They do not have the ability to judge or to kind of like say, oh, well, I don't agree with that. I'm going to choose to think like this. They don't have that capability yet. The better part of the first year of their life, they don't even understand that they are their own individual. These kids are just copying what they are seeing. And yes, that includes in both books and TV. Essentially, they are being little scientists trying on different things that they've seen to see what reaction it gets from other people and how that feels for them. Babies and toddlers tend to read the same book over and over and over again, so it does not matter whether or not what we're reading to them is educational, because it is educating them. Really take that in. It's getting stored in their unconscious and subconscious mind, which is why I say it is so important to choose books that are neutral. It's why I love those Love Every books for the under 1-year-old stage, because it is just presenting observations and assigning words to things that our children are seeing. It's helping them sort the world, not helping them judge or create a perception of the world. So the 3 things I really suggest looking out for and being aware of when it comes to choosing books is making sure you choose books that do not teach our children how to respond or assign value to certain things in life. Choosing books that do not teach them to deny themselves, and choosing books that do not expose or normalize things that we do not agree with as parents or our values and all of that. So I'm gonna give you guys 3 examples of this. First book is Bedtime for Zoe, which teaches children how to respond. My daughter is a water baby through and through. At 12 days old, she put her toes in the ocean for the first time, and by 6 months old, this girl was getting pummeled in the face by ocean waves or shower water regularly. She has never been scared about getting a face full of water. When we started reading this book, I would just hold the page closed where Zoe gets water in her face, and it talks about her not liking that feeling, and I would just rewrite the book a little bit. Overall, I did love the story. I just didn't like that part. Did that for months. months, my husband kind of rolled his eyes at me. And then I found myself in a conversation with my friends who both also had this book. And I was telling them that, yes, I love it, but I also just didn't agree with how it taught our children to dislike water in the face, or that water in the face was something to be disliked. They are copying what they're seeing. My friends rolled their eyes at me, which I get it. Like, I'm sure I seemed like a little crazy neurotic mom. It is nuanced. It is a little overkill. And so I was wondering if I was being a little too neurotic. And so then one day I was tired and I just read the book as it was originally written. My daughter got to see Zoe getting water in her face. She saw she disliked it. Nothing happened. So I read it the next time the same way as it was intended, and I did that for a few weeks. And sure enough, my daughter magically started to freak out whenever water touched her face, which led us to some of the hardest few months of our lives with her. I kicked myself because I knew better. I knew that this was gonna happen, which is why I tried skipping those pages. So trust your intuition as a parent here. And it wasn't until she was watching her favorite TV show, Trash Truck, and Trash Truck went under the ocean and was swimming under the sea and he saw a whale. My daughter was completely mesmerized by this scene. Told my husband about it the next day. They were watching it. She had him rewind that scene 5 times. So he says to her, do you want to go in the pool and go underwater like Trash Truck? And she, of course, jumped on it, said yes, and has had 0 issues putting her head underwater again since then. I know getting water in the eyes is something that a lot of kids struggle with, and having it in a book like this can help parents through that challenging time if your child is experiencing it. Just an alternate perspective here is I feel like sometimes these challenging moments become a chicken and the egg situation, in my opinion. When they repeatedly see that visual, they can end up developing the very problem the literature was intending to resolve. Be really aware about the things that you are reading or letting your child watch, because it may not be that they have an innate aversion to water on their face. It may just be that book that you read 5,000 times taught them to not like the feeling of water in their face. You know, a lot of the times when we notice something a little bit off in our kids, society trying to calm our nerves, they tell us it's normal. Oh, it's normal for kids to not like the feeling of water in their face. But just because something has become the average response or has become quote unquote normal, it does not mean that that was our child's actual innate reaction. Instead, I do think we need to look at the root problem and the root cause of it. For us, it means really making sure that we are choosing books that are presented in a neutral way and not teaching our children how to assign value to life events or how to respond in a specific way to life events. Which leads me to Max and Nana Go to the Park. This book teaches kids to deny their bodily autonomy and to place trust in an authority figure instead of themselves. In this book, Max falls and hurts his knee. The book reads, Max has fallen and hurt his knee. That happens sometimes. Nana cleans the ouchie part and puts a bandage on it. Great. I love that. It is a neutral observation of the events that are unfolding in real time. Fantastic. When we're talking to our kids and they are upset, this is exactly how I talk to my daughter. Awesome. Love that. It does not project the author's emotion into it, but really allows the reader to assign their own value of how that might feel. However, the book goes on to read, Max is upset, but Nana knows a hug will make him feel better. So now we're both assigning meaning to a fall, meaning if you fall down, you should be upset. But we're also teaching kids that adults or authority figures know what is best for their body, and that they should just accept touches even when they don't want them. If you actually take a minute to take in the body language of the imagery associated with this page, Max's knees are turned away from Nana, his hands are closed off and pulled in a vulnerable yet protective kind of way. He's pulling back from Nana. Nana's pulling him in. Our kids are paying attention to that subtlety in body language. Kids innately know how to read body language. remember being in like one of my psychology classes back in the day. There was a study done where kids from all different cultures were given the same facial expressions, and they were able to identify disgust, upset, anger, all of these things. It didn't matter what culture they were in, it didn't matter what language they spoke. We innately know how to read emotions. We don't need to teach an under 6-year-old emotional intelligence. We need to get out of the way so they can teach it to us, in my opinion. And kind of going off that too, when people touch us or try to distract us when we're in the middle of a big feeling, it actually prevents us from fully processing that emotion. When we cut the processing of our emotions off in real time in order to appease other people, it can actually create a backlog in our nervous system that results in tremors, shaking, anxiety, depression, a whole slew of things. One of the first things we teach people when establishing a safe group therapy environment was that if a group member was having a feeling, resist the urge to hand them a tissue or place your hand on their back. That actually disrupts their ability to fully process the emotion. If we watch Nat Geo and an animal is attacked, they have a physical response. They shake it off. They let that process out through their physical body. We really want to let people feel their feelings fully, hold space for them, and not hold them. Unless they're asking for it, unless they're reaching for it, it's not necessarily what they need. The need to offer physical comfort to somebody in pain is actually a codependent need. It is an idea that you think you have the ability to fix, rescue, or protect them. And what you're subtly communicating to them is saying, I don't think that you can take care of yourself, so I'm going to take care of you for you. Again, we're establishing limiting beliefs. We're establishing the way that they are going to respond or have a relationship with themselves, others, and the world at this stage. If we really want to get into teaching emotional intelligence to kids, which again, I do not think we need to teach emotional intelligence to kids. I think we need to let them teach us a thing or two about it. Go ahead and take a step back and just say, I'm here if you need me. I'm here with you. And that's it. There was like that viral video of the dad whose toddler had the temper tantrum and he just sat there, and when the toddler would throw himself into the dad's arms, the dad would hold him back, but he waited for the child to do it. Montessori, we follow the child, and that includes when big emotions are happening. It's not about distracting the child. It's not about knowing what's best for them in that moment. Of course, we intervene if there's cause for concern on a safety level. If they're about to hurt themselves or somebody else, we intervene, always. But other than that, let them fully process their emotion through. I would love if this book taught our kids that feelings are okay and they can ask for whatever they need in those moments where they are crying, versus assuming that someone else knows what they need. That's how we end up creating adults that assume they know what's best for other adults in these little moments that we are reading books to our 1-year-olds. Furthermore, in the book Off Limits, one of the first things they talk about in raising children that are less likely to experience sexual abuse is to let our children choose how they demonstrate affection. In this section, the authors go on to say, a child who is not permitted to resist physical affection in a safe situation, i.e. kissing a doting grandparent, may have difficulty resisting physical affection in an unsafe situation. So not only are we teaching children that adults know what's best for their bodies, we are demonstrating this in a situation where Max likely felt vulnerable. Yes, Nana is probably a safe person. To teach kids that they can't trust what is best for themselves in a vulnerable situation is a really concerning thing, in my opinion. So again, our kids are imprinting not only the language on this page, but the body language and the imagery, and it's fostering a sense of codependency. I believe the intentions of Nana and the authors of this book are well-meaning, but this book specifically is sent out when kids are turning 15 months old. They are just recording and imprinting everything into their little minds, and they will probably want to read this book 5,000 times over. You know, if this book was written exactly as it is and it was a 7-year-old, a very different story. But we have to think about the age appropriateness and developmental capacity of the intended audience. And with that said, we do still read both Bedtime with Zoe and Max and Nana Go to the Park. I do love the books overall. What I ended up doing after the Bedtime with Zoe situation was I started to just sticky tack the pages together so that way they are forced close. If I'm tired, I don't accidentally turn to that page. If somebody else is reading it to my daughter, I don't need to worry about whether or not they're reading it in the way I agree with or disagree with. Again, it is really hard to find books that present information in a neutral way, just in general. And then the last example I'm going to go into is making muffins. In this book, it exposes and normalizes something that we as parents and most parents I talk to say they don't agree with: their kids eating sugar, or they want to limit their kids' exposure to sugar. Yet when you look at the research, the average 2 to 5-year-old is consuming 13 teaspoons of sugar a day, which is more than twice the recommended limit of 6 teaspoons a day. Instead of the visual of refined white sugar, we could have used applesauce, bananas, brown sugar that your kid could have visually misinterpreted as coconut sugar, maple syrup, dates. There's so many alternative, budget-friendly, accessible sweeteners out there that could have been used. And considering the fact that baked goods are kids' second highest exposure to sugar, I do think it would have been really nice to see a healthier alternative put in there. By frequently exposing the child's subconscious mind to the visual of refined white sugar, it increases the likelihood that they will reach for it when the time comes. So when they go shopping for themselves as a teenager or a college student, compared to those kids who saw healthier alternatives typically. I know at this point somebody out there is rolling their eyes, and that's okay. Stick with me on this though. If you're baking at home regularly with your kids, you could overwrite this potentially in their theta brainwaves, but most kids are going to want to read this book 15 times every week, and most of us are not baking at home 15 times each week. And with that said, you could always have a conversation where you observe, oh look, they're using refined white sugar. That's interesting. When we bake at home, we use applesauce. You could totally say stuff like that each time you read it. However, that opens up to the next part of my issue with this, which is it teaches our kids to just accept it. Like I said at the start of this, most parents I talk to say they don't want their kids to have a ton of sugar. Yet, the research shows most kids 2 to 5 years old are getting more than twice of the recommended limit. So how does that happen? It happens because of books like this, TV shows, ads. We're constantly being bombarded with these visuals, with text, with ever-changing ingredient labels where they keep hiding what sugar's called now. And it is an uphill battle. It is exhausting. I know personally I will never be able to shelter my kid from sugar altogether. What I can do is limit the exposure to it in our kitchen and in the books we're reading during this really formative stage. So when flipping through books, ask yourself, are they presenting information in a neutral way? The layer deeper, is this assigning meaning or teaching my child how to respond to events? Does not mean we bypass reality by any means. Max has fallen and hurt his knee. That happens sometimes. We still observe reality. We prepare our kids for the reality, but we let them assign their own meaning to it. A child who falls and the adults in the room just observe is going to have a very different reaction to each fall compared to a kid who falls and the adults in the room always gasp and make a to-do about it. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Let me give you a hug. Those two kids are going to learn how to respond to falls in very different ways. And it's our job, again, as parents, to follow the child, to stick with observing where they're at and providing safety for them, while also letting them be the little scientists and see what feels right for them in their bodies and them as their own individual person or being. And the other question I ask myself is, does this fall in line with the values and beliefs I want my child to end up holding for themselves? And that can be about food, that could be about life experiences, their potential. There's so many different things that are communicated in books. They are going to develop their subconscious and unconscious mind. We cannot only have neutral information all of the time, but we can be really cognizant of what is being communicated towards them. It's really important to keep the developmental appropriateness in mind. Feel free to go ahead and rewrite books that you maybe don't think are sending the best message for this age. As they get older, that developmental appropriateness is going to change. But at this stage, you really want to think about, how is my child recording all of this, and how could this end up coming back around later on in life? Take a deep breath and just keep an eye out for things that could potentially be a chicken and the egg situation, like the water in the face. Make sure to hit that subscribe and notification button, because in my next video in the Montessori at Home series, I will be talking about the absorbent mind stage and sensitive period. So kind of going a little bit deeper into the background of how and why I came up with these things to avoid. In the meantime, if you have any questions at all, feel free to drop a comment below or hit me up on Instagram at the Confused Millennial. Have a good one.